Welcome to 52 Miniatures. I just finished painting 20 rats from the Age of Sigmar starter, feeling pretty good about myself. And then, well, my son handed over these huge monstrous rats from the same box. Oh great. He actually started to paint one on his own as a break from his Stormcast, but kind of got overwhelmed by the size. I totally get him. I now have the same overwhelming feeling. Big models are awesome, but when on my painting desk they feel intimidating. I mean, if we just compare the real estate, there is as much surface to paint on one of these ogres as there is on like 5 of the regular models. That's intimidating. The size also changes how I can paint. All the little shortcuts I can hide on a small model kind of becomes rather prominent when enlarged by 5. Also intimidating. I could keep listing intimidations, but that feels intimidating too. It's apparent that my regular no-hype layer and wash army painting style simply won't work as well or as swiftly on something this large. Can I add just one thing to my basic technique that makes these large models less intimidating to paint? This is makeup sponges, egg-shaped. Again, my knowledge outside of the lone guy stuck in a tower surrounded by minis and tiny bottles of paint is limited. I'm guessing sponges are meant to paint people rather than monstrous rats. But let me tell you, you're all wrong. Here's the basic sponge workflow run-through. Dip the sponge in water and get it all wet. Press out as much water as you can. Then place the sponge in some kitchen towel paper or similar and squeeze. Continue to try and get as much water out of the sponge as possible. The goal is a damp sponge and not a wet sponge. When satisfied, dip the tip of the sponge in paint and then dunk it on the moist paper to reduce the amount of paint in the sponge. It should be damp with paint, not wet with paint. Then lightly stipple the sponge against your mini. And magic happens. Well, at least magic for large miniatures. My last video on painting the little rats was about not selling magic tricks and techniques, staying away from gimmicks and instead relying on the common techniques most of us know and are comfortable using. Luckily, this is not a gimmick. And I'd like to confess that this is the first time I use a sponge in this manner. So it's not even something we need to be comfortable with initially. It works anyway. Most importantly, it's going to make painting large models a lot less intimidating. Viva la sponge. Let's try it on the rat ogres. I'm going to start adding a layer of a very bright yellow, an ice yellow, to the entire model. And I add a little water to the paint to thin it. Seems to work best that way. I've chosen this very bright warm color because most of my paints will come to enjoy a little warmth. But right off the bat, to give you annoying life choices, this could be a white or a very pale blue or green, depending on what you're painting. Now I immediately started with a large sponge, but can say that starting with a small sponge in all the hard-to-reach areas first, and then moving on to a larger sponge on the easy-to-reach areas seems like the best approach. I simply press the sponge straight down, lightly, move, press again. Let's call it stippling. It seems best to work around the model and not stipple the same area for too long. The paint needs a little while to dry before it likes to be stippled again, so round and round was better than staying in the same spot for a long time. In the end, this is like dry brushing, leaving the crevices black, only adding paint to raised areas, but without any chalky feel or brush marks. The sponge keeps the paint wet and the result is super smooth. So what's the point of this step? These very large surfaces need more life, not to look dull, more life than what a layer and wash can create on its own on these guys. I mean, they could be gals. I admit I'm not prolific in the field of rat anatomy, but like this bit here, it's just one big flat surface, the size of a regular-sized rat. By adding this smooth highlight first, we've created something interesting that will help us in the next steps. You'll see. The brighter surface will also ensure I can get a good and simple coverage with single layers of paint, saving a lot of time. The sponge is also a great swift way to just add paint, period, on large surfaces, period, a time saver. Like I painted all the big metal bits with the sponge, giving a nice textured surface swifter than what I could have done with a brush. Small bits still had to be painted with a brush, sure, but still. I'm now going to apply the workflow used on my little clan rats. If you haven't seen that video already, check it out because it explains a bit more in detail of what's about to happen. But what is really interesting now is how the same basic army painting workflow and paints I've already used for the rest of the army can be just slightly adapted to suit these large models in terms of both efficiency and visual result. We're going to rip through these monstrous rats like Stormcast on steroids. That would probably be a Space Marine, I guess. And I'm exaggerating, but I'm just trying to keep motivated. I paint on my rat skin color, but water it down with a couple of brushes full of water. The water thins the paint and makes it a lot easier to paint swiftly on large surfaces, as well as makes the paint a little transparent. This would not have looked good without the highlighted sponge surface underneath. But with that highlighted surface underneath, we can see that the skin looks a little more alive. The sponge thing shines through the rat skin colored paint. The surface is brighter in the raised areas and darker in the shadows. And as I said, one swift coat is all that's needed. As there's so much surface on a big model, this is a good time saver. With the black wash mostly on the furry bits and of course all the metallics, and we're really getting somewhere. The sponge foundation gives us a subtle but pleasing effect, and mentally this helps so much. This might actually look good in the end feeling really helps when working on something large like this. I then grabbed a little sponge again, this time with the skin highlight color, and stipple it against all the areas I can reach. And smack bang, we've got great smooth skin. Of course, I can't reach all the skin areas without smudging metallics, so I don't. But this is actually a good thing. The sponge reaches only the most protruding areas, and they're the only ones that need to be highlighted. Who needs a highlighted armpit, you know? And I mean, if there's anywhere in life I'd make sure not to visit, it would be a rat ogre's armpit. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing for the rest of the major parts of the body. We have the fleshy exposed bits and the loincloth. I need to stress that all the paints are thinned with water, including the ones I sponge stipple with. There's no formula really, because all paint brands are different. But instead of a thick blob of paint on my palette, it's more like a fluid consistency that flows off the brush, nice and easy. Now I'll soon be adding an intense pink contrast paint to all of this, and I thought, if I sponge on a little texture with that icy yellow, this icy yellow should result in a brighter pink sort of thing. This is a little overkill perhaps, but it was fast. And I wanted to demonstrate that the sponge can be used for a little texture effect, if one wants it to. Imagine you're painting a large vehicle or something. Maybe you've even primed it blue because it's a Space Marine thingy. Well, you could do a smooth sponge thing for smooth highlights, but you could also stipple on a little war damage texture after that with the same sponge. Now with the super pink contrast paint on, the rat is suitably nasty looking. The whole process and choice of color is designed to ensure that mistakes that happen during a swift army painting session are actually not a bad thing. Again, explained better in the Clan Rats painting video. But if I by mistake get the pink contrast paint on the grey parts of the skin, it just looks cool and not like a mistake. And now that there's so much grey skin, I even do it on purpose to add character and variation. And now, welcome to heaven. I'm of course going to do some highlights with a brush, but wherever I can, I reach for the sponge. And this is kind of the most relevant shot in this entire painting story, because seeing how this intimidating piece of plastic transforms in front of my eyes into a great looking paint job without any major skill and within the framework of a sort of sped up army painting workflow is exactly the confidence booster I need to keep going. Painting can be tough sometimes. It takes time and the pile of grey plastic is high. It helps to accept that, one boot at a time and soon my army will conquer the world, or at least, my local club's rollable gaming mats. But it helps even more when the big mental unscalable mountain turns into some gentle rolling hills that you just wouldn't mind taking a stroll through. I mean, just look at those feet and hands. And just because it feels so good, here's the yellow highlight on the cloth. Now, the reason this works so well is because of the large size of the miniature. I've used the right tool with the right purpose in mind. Imagine a giant or a big demon, a large terrain piece. This could be so helpful. Now, here we are. This is level 1. You could field these if rolling dice is your major interest. I'm going to do a round of quick highlights, same as on my little rats, so that it all gets a similar end result. I do, however, think that this is a step where most large models actually make life a little easier. Edge highlighting the side of a flag-sized loincloth is a lot easier than one the size of a breadcrumb. So if you want to practice edge highlights, this might actually be a preferable place to start. Now, in my last video, I mentioned brush control as one of those annoying things. You see others paint miniatures and it all looks so good, so fast, every brush stroke of the brush done with confidence and splendid results. But when you do it, it looks like turd. Now, in the comment section, I got a question. Could you make a video on brush control? And I don't mean to offend, but no. That's kind of the annoying thing that I was talking about. Of course, everything can be contextualized, but some things are kind of mostly learnt by doing. It's like if you pick up a guitar and you watch a video of someone playing a super fast solo, and then you try, and your pet cats attack you because they think you're a dying bird. And the fact of the matter is actually that the guy you watched playing that solo, well, his cat attack scars, they've healed long ago. Healed during the hours he sat every day for years practicing to be able to play that solo. Painting minis can be the same, and I'm not saying this to put you down, it's actually meant as encouragement. Because if we reverse this equation, it means that the more you paint, the better you get. And because painting miniatures is fun, well, that means you just need to sit down and have fun, and without actually trying, you're getting better. And your scars will heal. Now, coming towards the end, I noticed fundamental differences when it comes to painting large miniatures and how they work with a predetermined army color scheme. As I've said a million times, I started with the clan rats. I devised the color scheme with the little rats as test models. I've taken these, let's call them prejudices, from the little rats and done pretty much everything the same way on my large models. The color scheme still works, but I should have taken time, turned off the autopilot and actually thought about the distribution of colors and how they would look on these very different large sculpts. If we just pause here. My clan rats looked good because they had massive blue shields. But where's all the blue gone? Oh, these guys don't have shields. The red loincloths look a lot like exposed skin. Oh. The clan rats didn't really have that much exposed skin. The huge chunks of steel look kind of boring. Oh, the clan rats didn't really have that kind of big chunks of steel. Now, what if I would have painted the loincloths blue, or even a completely different yellow, or the big metallic chunks blue in places? Lessons learned. To save face, I tinted parts of the metallic with a very watered down blue, like shadow reflections or something. But only done, honestly, because I wanted more blue happening. I also added rust paint. I don't really know why I did that. And with that kind of thinking, well, you know it's time to move on. Because finally, it's the infused warp stones. These are very specific for these rat models, but you'll often find large models have prominent details of this kind. Like special effects, maybe oozing wounds, scars, tattoos, or glowy plasma things, fire or magic smoke. I mean, kind of the same as on many small models, but because of their large size, they become an important feature that can be a new puzzle to try and solve how to paint best. You know, a warp stone on a small Skaven rat might just be a little blob of green paint, but here it's a major feature of the model. Now you can see how I solved my puzzle. It's nothing super special. My only tip would be that if you want to paint a very bright color that stands out, like a green or a yellow or a pink or something, it can be easier to do it if you start with the bright white paint first. So in this case, the warpstone power kind of sizzles out through the cracks in the skin, and to get the most of my very bright green, I started by brightening up the cracks with a bright, almost white speed paint. This could probably have been a watered down white as well. I can then water down my green to make it flow real well into the crevices, but it'll still shine brightly green even though it's watered down, as there is a whitish base underneath. Now, there's been a few introductions of alternative techniques in this video. I think the sponge is awesome. In the grand scheme of things, however, it's slightly irrelevant. What is relevant, I think, is that if you're working on an army and some large miniatures come along, then, well, they might become a mental hurdle. I tend to count miniatures when I paint. 10 done, that's one squad. Another 10, next squad done. Ooh, only a couple of big ones left. And then I start and realize one big one takes as long as the 10 small ones. And it can be dispiriting. Instead of just applying the same workflow as on the regular minis and get worn out, it might be worth a little brain time, give it a think, and see if there's ways to paint that could get you ahead. Maybe ways you didn't think of previously because it wouldn't have worked on the little miniatures. Oh, and don't forget to clean your brushes regularly. I mean, like, pretty much all the time. Just saying. Now, the big rats, they do look cool, especially with the small ones herding them along. My son will love the warpstone thing, and hopefully my paint job won't discourage him from painting that third rat. If this is the case, then we can probably do a joint effort and finish it together. Please like and subscribe. If you want to support the creation of these free-for-all videos, please consider supporting me on Patreon. It makes a huge difference. Thank you for watching. Bye.